My guest today has a mission to empower others through natural methods. Michael Roviello, welcome to the show. Michael earned 2 Navy accommodation medals, gold stars. Let's talk a little bit about your centers and what you guys do there.
Yeah, we train people how to adapt and react to stress in a healthy way, understanding what's happening from a physiological perspective in the body. So by combining breathing exercises, the power of the mind, and cold therapy, there's a variety of different benefits. There's this fat loss benefit from doing cold therapy.
Is it significant though? Is it measurable?
Welcome to the Lee Labrada Show.
Brought to you by Lean Body, the #1 protein shake in gyms across America.
Welcome back, you guys. It's no secret that in our society, sick or injured people are being overly prescribed and jumping straight into invasive procedures like surgery without exploring more natural and holistic healing and recovery options. Today, we're going to be talking to an expert who knows a lot about natural modalities like cold water therapy, Wim Hof breathing exercises, and the role that these can play in your healing from injuries and improving recovery. My guest today has a mission to empower others to take responsibility for their own mental, physical, and emotional health through natural methods. He is the co-owner of Optimyze, Mind, Body, and Breath, which is a successful chain of human optimization centers in Arizona that empowers others to take responsibility for their mental, emotional, and physical health. Michael Roviello, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lee. This is a pleasure.
It's good to see you. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your background for a moment. You spent years in the U.S. Navy conducting helicopter search and rescue missions. You were deployed around the globe as a helicopter rescue swimmer, combat search and rescue crewman, and anti-submarine warfare operator deployed for missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. And hey guys, I want you to know that Michael earned 2 Navy accommodation medals, gold stars for his successful recovery of a downed fighter pilot and selection for Air Crewman of the Year for the United States Navy. Just amazing, Michael. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, we were the jack of all trades. We did a little bit of everything. Hunting submarines, searching for people. Helicopters have many missions, so I'm grateful to be here to share.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. Michael, you were injured during your service for our country, and you went down a path that included visiting with the normal channels, doctors, and then you went on a path of self-healing and self-discovery. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in the military, so I had access to great health care. I got out and had a VA system as well, so once again had access to health care. And I worked for a university and had access to health care, so there was lots of options for me. And so I have a service-connected disability. Essentially, I had an injury while I was in the service, and so I kind of had these little bouts of pain. And what I would find is that there were certain times in my career where I was in a lot of pain, and it would kind of keep me immobile. And then there was times where I was functioning, but I was relying heavily on like pharmaceuticals at the time. Take this Motrin, take this pill,
right?
And just trying to dampen the inflammation, dampen the pain, so I could get back to business. And when I got out of the service, I realized that it just progressively started to get worse, and it became a real problem. So I started going through all the different procedures. I was doing these epidural steroid injections for the inflammation into my cervical spine. I was taking a variety of different pills, from painkillers to muscle relaxers to anti-inflammatory. I was doing a variety of different adjustments and procedures. I was just throwing everything I could at it because it was mentally really getting in the way of my job, my personal life. And then eventually they found that I had a lot of neurological issues. When you have any issues with your cervical spine, it affects your hands and your arms. So I started losing hand strength, muscle atrophy, and I was also starting to lose my balance, which I thought was very strange. And so initially my doctors thought I had multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
Which was like, my grandmother had multiple sclerosis. So I saw that as a kid of, oh no, this is a long, nasty road. And I saw her decline as a young child. So I was obviously nervous. But what I did find was that I actually had a cervical spine injury, that my spinal cord was being choked. And so it felt like messages from my mind were not making its way smoothly throughout my body. And that's why I had the balance issues and the pain and muscle spasms and all kinds of different things like that. And so I started to, I had to get emergency surgery. And what they did was they did a fusion through my neck, and they fused my spine with like a 2-3 inch plate of titanium. And then what they had to do is use cadaver parts to basically restructure your spine. And so after the surgery, I thought, well, that's it. I'm done. Now I can finally get back to my life. And so I was excited about that. I had this titanium that pretty much is going to live with me forever, so be it. And what I noticed about 9 months later is I started to experience the same problems, which was loss of strength, pain, inflammation, muscle spasms. And so when I went back to the surgeon to kind of give him an update, and they did more MRIs and obviously look into this, their recommendation was I was going to have to go back under the knife and get a fusion above and below that 4-inch titanium plate that I already had.
So what's running through your mind at that point?
I was really frustrated because the recovery for that was nasty. I'd lost a lot of weight. I lost a lot of my gains. I was working out and stuff like that. And I was just like, I don't want to go through this again. And I was already starting to dabble. There was some people that kind of came into my life at that moment that, they plant little seeds. And I was also overly medicating, because of all the pills. And I was starting to have problems with my blood work. My blood work was coming back with elevated, I believe it's liver enzymes and stuff like that. So basically it was showing that my liver was under a lot of stress. So continuing to go down that road, it just felt like it was a road to nowhere. More surgery, more pills, and who knows, maybe I was going to be invited back for another surgery a couple of years out. And they were also telling me that I wasn't going to be able to do this or that. And there's a lot of risks with spinal surgeries, of course, right? It's a delicate piece of the body. So I just paused at that moment. I told the doctor at the time that I wanted to explore other options, and that if I ran into a brick wall and I couldn't find anything, that I'd be back. And so that's when I started to go down the rabbit hole of natural healing, holistic healing, alternative healing, many different names. And there was a book that really opened the door for me. It was a book by Dr. John Sarno, who is a medical doctor. It was called The Mind-Body Prescription.
The Mind-Body Prescription.
Yep, and that book was talking about psychosomatic pain. It was talking about tension in the mind. Tension myoneural syndrome creates pain in the body. So the one area that was really unexplored for me was the mind and emotional states, because I had done all the procedures. I had gotten the injections. I'd taken the pills. I did the surgery, done the adjustments. And so he was talking about, no, this unresolved trauma, unresolved, emotions are really what's causing your body havoc. And so that was kind of foreign for me. So I decided, okay, well, let me look into this and let me start exploring.
Were you resistant to that idea at first?
Yeah, I think...
Skeptical, maybe?
Yeah, skeptical. Culturally, I wasn't... I didn't come from a place... I grew up in Queens, New York, an Italian-American family, and I was in the service. And this whole idea of talking about your emotions and opening up about what's going on inside. I was very resistant to that. I'd like to say that I wore a pretty good body armor, and I like to show people a side of me that I wanted them to see. And I wasn't necessarily open to the idea of being vulnerable. Now, I learned a little bit later on in life that vulnerability is power. I wish I would have learned that a bit earlier. But at that moment, that was not something that I was open to. But I knew that this was the path because there was all of these little things that were popping up that were directing me towards meditation and breath work and trying to find alternatives for anti-inflammatory. So I made this commitment to myself at that time, especially when the blood work came back and they had to do a sonogram and stuff of my liver to see if I had serious problems. I made a commitment that I needed to absolutely find an alternative to everything, that I would not take any medication at all. I was going to go zero on the medication.
So you made your mind up at that point.
No aspirin, no
I'm done.
Tylenol, nothing.
Was it difficult to get off the painkillers?
It was difficult to get off the painkillers. It was difficult to get off all of them because they were such a quick fix. But what it did is it propelled me to learn about my body deeper than I ever have. So if I had pain, I needed to find a source of a natural remedy, routine, herb, whatever it might be, that will assist with pain. If I had inflammation, I needed to, one, what is inflammation? Most people don't even know what it is. You need to learn about what is inflammation, and then find an alternative, whether it be a technique, whether it be a herb, whether it be a process of some kind that will help with inflammation. So I started to really learn and explore the mind, the emotional body, and also the physical body deeper than I ever have.
I have to ask you, Michael, because we were talking about this earlier. I understand that you made a trip down to the Amazon and that you actually lived among indigenous people there and worked with a shaman. That's right. And can you tell us about some of the things that you learned on that leg of your journey?
Yeah, so I was like a documentary junkie. I love documentaries. I love inspiring stories. I love travel. I love history. I love anthropology. I love culture. So one of the things that always frustrated me a little bit was when I learned about history, it was always from the European perspective. You know, what did Europeans have to say about health, spirituality, medicine, which they have a lot of great information to share. But I was really intrigued by Native Americans, mainly because I was born and raised in Queens, New York, and so I didn't have a lot of exposure to Native Americans in that environment. But living in Arizona, like you could really feel the spirit of the Native Americans there. And so I was really curious about what they had to say about health and spirituality and what their process was. I felt like they, in a sense, were silenced. So I started watching a lot of documentaries about Native tribes, and I was really intrigued. And there was this very specific groups from the Amazon jungle that were practicing these really ancient techniques for thousands of years that they were still practicing today. And so they were drinking a variety of different hallucinogen brews. They were using frog poison to boost the immune system. I mean, these were like original biohackers. I mean, these guys were doing biohacking before the term was ever developed. And so I was really intrigued. And so I had the opportunity to go down to Brazil and Peru and learn from the native people who had been passed down this information from their grandparents and their grandparents, so many, many years of lineage. And I tried it all. I did it all. I tried the ayahuasca. I tried the frog poison. And I'll tell you, it was extremely powerful. I have a great respect for that medicine and their process. And one thing I learned about Native people is that they're very connected to nature. And I realized that their connection with nature is something that's hard for us to understand here in the West. And they used to call the plants their teachers. And so you can have a really deep introspective work through their process. And I also learned that all of their medicine is very strong and harsh. So we live in a society where it's like, hey, I'm not feeling well, take this pill. And it's easy to swallow the pill. You don't even know if it's working or not, right? You just take the pill and it's doing something that you don't truly understand. Okay, well, it's dissolving in my stomach and then it's going into my bloodstream. And from there, that's about all I know. That's like the limit of our knowledge. They have a very intricate process where their healing modalities require your participation. It's not like you're just going to take this potion, go sit down, and everything else will just happen on its own. You actually have to go through some suffering. So all of their...
Did you say go through some suffering?
Suffering.
Okay,
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, all of their medicine requires participation and suffering. So for example, they use this Amazonian toad, or it's frog. There's a difference between a frog and a toad. It's frog, and it's a giant tree frog. And what they do is they respect this frog, and what they do is they capture these frogs and they stretch them out. So they get really stressed. They tie their hands and their legs and they stretch them out a bit, and they get stressed, but they don't hurt them. And I think it's the only animal in the Amazon jungle that has no predators. Like literally all the snakes and everything just stays away from this giant tree frog because...
Except for the humans.
Except for the humans.
Go figure.
Because it's got poison.
Sure.
And what they do is they take the poison off this frog's back and they'll burn your skin with like a little, like a punk, like you would maybe light a firework with. And then they wipe the poison on your skin. And so immediately you have a reaction. And the reaction
So
is...
you felt this immediately, right?
Oh, immediately. Your ears start to warm up. You get a really high temperature fever. You're sweating.
And did you start hallucinating right away?
No, this is a non-hallucinogenic. This is more of an immune system builder. It was the warriors would do this in the tribes. It was like a warrior medicine. So it would prime the body, and it would help them with sickness and disease. And so when I started to study it, because there was some research that was done in Italy by an Italian scientist, what it really was doing was basically working like a natural vaccine. So it's this hormetic stressor that created stress in your body. I mean, clearly it's a toxin, but then your body reacts and adapts to that, and it builds their immunity so much stronger. It's the same concept of like essentially the way a vaccine works, but they were using these peptides that were in this frog poison. And so what I learned, it was super anti-inflammatory. It was extremely powerful when it came to like pain relief and all kinds of different peptides in this frog. But you're going to suffer. You're going to puke. You're going to be sweaty. You're going to have a fever. And pretty much for 20 minutes, you're going to be very vulnerable. But when
did it fix your issue? Did it take away the pain?
Well, it started to strengthen my body. And it started to allow me to release and get rid of, I would say, things that were no longer serving me. They have a very different perspective on healing than we do. And so they look at like emotions and all that stuff are basically trapped in the body and they're causing disharmony. And so when you start to go through their processes, their fasting processes, their different potions, these poisons, you're releasing that physical and energy that's coming off of you. And so these were basically just practices used by these tribes and are still practiced to this day.
And so it's almost cathartic is what it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in other words, you're releasing all this. How long did you do this, and were you able to take anything away from that? You know, I'm assuming that you haven't brought frog poison back with you and that you're using it on a regular basis.
I do actually, believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't used it in the last year. The last time I did it was right before, actually right when COVID hit. When COVID hit, I said, okay, there's this stuff floating around. I want to get my immune system like running optimally. So I'm going to go to the things that I know work. So I scheduled an appointment with the person that does these sort of. It's done in the United States here as well.
It's done here as well.
Yeah, and I went through this process, boosting my immune system, and going through this. It's almost like everything they do is spiritual. You know, there's a spiritual element to everything they do. It's not so separate like it is here in the States. And so I was just very intrigued by their methodology. I was very intrigued by the way they go about things. I was very intrigued by their medicine. So I just became an explorer, and I just explored it all so I can feel like I have a good understanding mentally of how it works, because, you know, I'll research, but then also like, what's the experience like?
Do you still have pain today? Do you have to manage that, or did you find, I guess for lack of a better word, a cure for the condition you had?
Yeah, there was no quick fix. What I realized was I had to go through a journey of the soul to resolve things from my childhood, from my military career. I had to change my lifestyle. I had to change my behavior. I had to change my perception. I had to change my outlook on life. I had to do a lot of different things. I had to essentially become new in many ways to shed any of those injuries. But yes, I never had to go back to the surgeon. I never had to have another conversation with him. I never had to get another procedure. I never had to take any other pills. I never had to get any more injections.
And you feel like you were able to clear some of these issues that were manifesting themselves as illness and pain in your body.
Yeah, the way John Sarno talks about is that basically if you have tension in the mind, and that will translate to tension in the body. And so sometimes our awareness is that we don't even know that we have these unresolved issues. We've buried them so deep into our pocket, and we pretend that they aren't bothering us or that they're just something of the past. And so it does take a variety of like letting go, resolving, and accepting. There's like a, kind of an acceptance that comes from it, and also a change in how you see things. And, you can notice it in everyday life. People walk around with different fears and anxieties because they are essentially perceiving their situation as fearful, or a variety of different patterns that we develop as children. And so I went through a lot of just shedding old patterns and behaviors, and just became a very new person. But it wasn't just because of the Amazon medicine. That was just really one chapter in my life.
That was one piece of it.
Yeah, it was meditation. It was breath work. It was cold water. It was sauna. It was all of these techniques. And the one thing I found that they all had in common is they have all been around for thousands of years. So regardless, the frog poison I know is it's very extreme, and most people are going to be like,
I don't know that everybody's going to run out and get into frog poison.
Yeah, it's called Kambo, Kambo. Check it out.
But certainly you piqued my curiosity. We've spoken earlier, and I know that from our conversations that you've used cold water and breathing techniques as a tool for self-healing.
Yes.
And understanding of yourself.
Absolutely.
So can we talk a little bit about the cold water therapy and breath work?
Absolutely.
Let's go through each of these one at a time. On the breath work, what are some of the things that we can learn from breath work?
So breathwork's an interesting topic, because when I first started seeing breathwork come on the scene, I said, why the hell would anyone want to learn breathing exercises?
Yeah, we already know how to breathe, right?
Exactly.
That's what everybody thinks.
It didn't make any sense to me. But I was, intrigued. I just kept an open mind. And I saw people who I respected doing it. And I'm like, well, if they're adopting these practices, like there's got to be something there. Whether it was like a Joe Rogan or a Laird Hamilton, it was just different people who really were badasses in many ways. Some of these, the Gracie family were doing it. And so I was like, if these guys are doing it, there's got to be some gems there. And so what I learned about breath work, and there's many different things that it does, if you want to learn how to tap into your nervous system and be the driver and director of your nervous system without pills, without molecules, you have instant access to ramp up the nervous system, which they call upregulate, or downregulate your nervous system. And if you look at society, everyone's either trying to create more energy in the body or decrease energy in the body. They can't settle down. They can't relax. Their body is what they call sympathetic dominant, which is like fight or flight, or they just wake up, they're lethargic, they don't have enough energy, so they're drinking Red Bulls, they're taking uppers, they're finding place.
So excuse me for interrupting you. So that they're looking outside themselves for a way to change their mental state, whether it's upregulating or downregulating. They're relying on caffeine, or in some other cases, other things to calm themselves down. And what I'm hearing is that we actually have the ability to control that ourselves through breathing techniques.
Absolutely. And Joe Dispenza, he calls it change your state of being. Everybody's trying to change their state of being. Hey, I need more energy. I feel too low, or I'm anxious all the time. I got way too much energy, this feeling in my body that I need to find a way to settle down. I can't sleep. So we're all trying to change our state of being, and we feel like we don't have access internally, but we do through breathing exercises and other techniques as well. And what I loved about the breathing exercise, because I'm like a history, documentary junkie, I like anthropology and culture, I went down the rabbit hole. I said, well, who the hell is doing breathing exercises? And sure enough, you go into the East, which is like the Asia, India, and you start to look into the native people of those territories, and sure enough, you find that they were using breathing techniques for thousands of years. Kundalini yoga, they were using the Himalayan native people, the Sherpas, were using different breathing techniques, tumo breathing. They were able to stay. These guys have superpowers. They're able to hike to high elevations, maximizing they're improving their CO2 tolerance and oxygen ratios. They were able to go out into cold. They would wrap themselves with these, in the freezing weather, with these cold sheets and do these tumo breathing exercises to warm the body up. This is all like stuff that you see in movies on Marvel. And I was just intrigued by these monks and their techniques. And so no matter where I was looking, I was tying it to what did our ancestors do and who are the masters. And so what I found was the breathing techniques and the meditation techniques, the Eastern cultures were really the masters of that. And so I started to go down a rabbit hole and learn a variety of techniques. And then, of course, we live in a world of science. So understanding what's happening from a physiological, biological, chemistry perspective in the body. And Wim Hof was doing a great job of sharing how breathing techniques were being scientifically researched at that time.
We've heard that name many times, Wim Hof. Could you tell us a little bit about him and generally just what the principles are, the breathing principles?
Yeah, Wim Hof is someone who, at this stage of our lives, at this current time on the planet, has basically shown humanity. I think he has 91 million followers practicing the Wim Hof method. 91 million people practicing this method. He has shown us that we can do more than we think we can. And so what he did is proved it. Instead of just talking about it, he went out there and he proved it. And people thought he was crazy for many years until they really caught on to how powerful this effective tool was. And he had 26 Guinness records. He was swimming under the ice. He held his breath for like 6 minutes under the ice. He hiked Mount Everest in his shorts. He ran a marathon with no water in the desert. He ran a marathon in the North Pole region barefoot. He stood in ice in New York City in Times Square up to his neck for 2 hours. So he just was showing the world that the body's capable of much, much more. And he had a documentary where he was talking about his ability to never get sick again and boost his immune system naturally through the mind and through breathing and through cold therapy. And so I was super intrigued. I'm like, man, this guy's superhuman. What is he doing? And so what I learned was really he was gathering ancient wisdom from the Eastern philosophies for the breathing techniques. And then, of course, the Nordic tribes, right? People always forget that Europe was all native indigenous people as well. These Nordic tribes of Finland, and they were using cold therapy as part of their practices, and also other tribes around the world, because I studied a lot about cold therapy. So I learned that tribes in South America were using it, tribes in Africa were using it, tribes in Asia, and pretty much all over the planet. Native Americans here in North America were using it. So it's actually very, very old practice. And he had packaged it. And what he was doing is he gave his body to science, allowing these universities, both in Europe and the United States, to study physiologically what was happening. And one of the things that they found was they injected him with an endotoxin. If I injected you with an endotoxin, you would be sick immediately. Think of like E. coli, right? E. coli is going to trigger an immune response. You're going to get a fever, probably get nauseous, raise your temperature. Your heart's gonna beat fast. Your body's fighting, just like when you get a flu or something nasty like that, and you get sick. And what he realized by doing the breathing technique, the E. coli didn't even bother him. He didn't get affected. He didn't have the same response that other people who had gotten the same injection would, which is the strong immune response. He was able to basically stunt inflammation real time using a breathing technique, not have the physical pain and nausea, not have the serious fevers. And also when they were measuring his blood work, because it's a study, they're looking at everything, they realized his white blood cells were still doing their job, which is fight infections, what they do. The inflammation was being lowered in his body, and he was able to stay calm and relaxed while he basically was essentially poisoned, by this E. coli bacteria. It's a bacteria, and bacteria obviously set the immune system off. And so I was really intrigued. So I said, I'm going to go study with this guy, and that's what I did.
So you went, studied, and became certified in Wim Hof. And for those of us that don't know what Wim Hof is, can you summarize for us what these techniques look like?
Yeah, Wim Hof method. Wim Hof is a person. He has a method based on his studies and his practices. And the first pillar of the Wim Hof method is breathing exercises, which is a very specific type of exercise. Then the second pillar is commitment, which is really learning the power of the mind. So there's a whole element of the power of the mind. And the third pillar is cold therapy. So by combining breathing exercises, the power of the mind, and cold therapy, there's a variety of different benefits that you can get.
Are they done simultaneously?
No, the breathing exercise is done, you essentially do it in a room, in a relaxed type of place, laying down, and you would go through this exercise, which is 30 deep breaths, followed by an exhale.
30 deep breaths?
Yeah, followed by an exhale and hold. You hold your breath for a couple of minutes.
The cadence on those deep breaths do you take a certain number of seconds to breathe in, hold, and then a certain number of seconds to breathe out, or is it rapid?
Cyclic, yeah. So it's
Cyclic?
more like a...
That cadence right there, 30
Yeah.
deep breaths. Okay, so if I do that, obviously you have experience with the breathing techniques, me not so much. If I do that, I'm going to get lightheaded, right?
Everyone will, even
Okay.
me. Yeah, I just feel slightly lightheaded just from the 3 breaths I took.
Okay.
So you're going to get lightheaded, a little dizzy, so people get nervous. That's why you don't do it when you're driving. You don't do it near water.
You
You don't do it
want to
near
do it
water.
while you're driving.
You do it in a calm place.
Okay.
It's like if you were going to do a meditation or
Okay.
a workout, right? So it's 30 deep breaths followed by an exhale, a deep inhale, exhale, and then hold. So you're holding your breath on an exhale. And what
on an exhale?
Yeah.
So you hold your breath after you've emptied your lungs?
Yes.
So you wait till the lungs are empty?
Not completely empty.
Not complete, but
it's
on
more
the
like
exhale.
a deep breath in, then you let it go.
And then hold it?
And then you hold.
Okay, and how long do you hold it?
Well, you hold for as long as you can. And
Okay.
as your body gets stronger, you start to build what they call CO2 tolerance. So oxygen, you just took in a bunch of oxygen by breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. You're taking all this oxygen.
So you have extra oxygen in your blood at that moment.
Exactly. They call it breathing in excess of metabolic demand. To just go back to weight training and bodybuilding, when you're weight training and bodybuilding, right, you're increasing metabolic demand because your body is moving weights, or even if you're doing cardiovascular work, right, your metabolic demand is increased. Right now, we're sitting, we're relaxing, our metabolic demand is very low. But when I breathe as if I'm hiking up a mountain, but I'm really just sitting here and relaxing, now we're starting to kind of hack the body and change the ratio of gases in the body. So we're taking in lots of oxygen and we're letting off lots of CO2. So oxygen's going up, CO2's going way down. And so that's why you can hold your breath for a very long period of time on that exhale. Some people hold their breath like 3 minutes. And
Depending on how much oxygen they got into them.
based on their ability to control their CO2 tolerance. So it's more like as you get stronger with breath work, just like if you get stronger with weight training, you're just building that muscle. It's like a muscle. And then eventually you start to maybe, I can only hold my breath for 45 seconds. And then you get to a minute and a half. Before you know it, you're holding your breath for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. Wow. And so you're building that strength. And then after you cannot hold your breath any longer, then you take a giant breath in, and that's just a recovery breath, and that's only 15 seconds. Okay. And you do multiple rounds of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And physically, what are you feeling? I mean, you obviously you're holding your breath, so the CO2 is increasing during that period, right?
Yes.
Is there anything other than lightheadedness that you feel? How do you know? In other words, how do you know it's working?
Well, it changes your state of being immediately.
Okay,
so
and which way?
Makes you feel more calm and relaxed. So if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling like you have too much energy in the body and you go through a Wim Hof training, or maybe you struggle with meditation because you know it's good for you, but when you try to sit down and do a meditation, You basically just can't get away from your thoughts, that kind of monkey mind.
Okay.
You do 3 rounds of Wim Hof breathing, you can lay and stay in a very relaxed state of being for as long as you need. So it'll change your state of being immediately. There's also euphoria that occurs from this change in gas ratios. So by breathing in, breathing out, you're getting higher in your own supply. So you have these like euphoric type of feelings inside the body. And the brain waves are doing lots of different things. So your brain waves are shifting, your heart rate is shifting. When you're breathing in,
Slower?
when you're breathing in and out, your heart rate actually is going up because you're causing stress in the body. I mean, think about it. If you're doing a bunch of curls and you're going like pretty fast, your heart rate's going to come up, and that's stress.
Right.
And so this is hormesis. It's the what doesn't kill us makes us stronger kind of stress.
Okay.
And so our bodies really, they want more stress in many ways. And that's why exercise is so good for you, because it's a positive stressor. So this breathing exercise is very similar. It's a positive stressor. And when your body is under this element of stress, because you're also holding your breath for a long period of time, so your oxygen is going really low. When I measure my oxygen with one of those pulse oximeters, my blood oxygen saturation will get down to like the 70s and sometimes the 60s.
Wow, that's really low.
Yeah, because blood
normal is what, like
95.
95.
Yeah. So you're going hypoxic. And so what we learned about hypoxia, and the Nobel Prize about 4 or 5 years ago was actually awarded to some scientists who studied hypoxia. And what they learned is that intermittent hypoxia builds cellular resilience. Your cells learn how to operate in this low oxygen environment, and so it makes them stronger. And so there's this connection and ratio to blue whales. I mean, think about whales or mammals. They go very deep into the ocean. They're holding their breath for a long period of time under pressure. But look how long they live. They live a long time. So there's this connection between intermittent hypoxia and the telomeres, which telomeres have something to do with like how long we live and longevity. The longer
The strands on the ends of cells, right?
DNA.
Of the DNA.
Yeah. The longer the telomeres, the longer the life. So there's a lot we're learning about this physiology and cellular resilience and strength. And so the Wim Hof method is providing a big punch for as easy as the technique is, because you're also getting this giant anti-inflammatory benefit, because when your body's under stress from the deep breathing and also from the breath hold, your body's producing something called epinephrine. It's a fight or flight hormone. And epinephrine acts as a inflammatory suppressor. So you're creating your own medicine essentially in your body. And it's a very powerful natural technique for inflammation, for pain, for calming your mind down so that you feel more relaxed, and getting the nervous system. You're teaching your nervous system how to go from fight or flight, because when you're deep breathing, you're going fight or flight, and when you're holding your breath, then you're going into parasympathetic, right? So you're feeling states of stress, states of calm, states of stress, states of calm. So what I've learned about the nervous system is that the nervous system is something that needs to be trained. It's not something that is just trained. Basically you have to
know.
You have to push it a little bit. Just like the body, if you want it to grow muscle, you have to push it a little bit. It knows how to do it, but it's not just going to grow muscle by itself. You have to put the load on it, right? You have to pick up those weights. You have to do the deadlifts. You have to increase that demand. And then your body adapts by saying, hey, Lee's going to go pick up some heavy weights again. We need to ramp up growth and repair.
That's right. There's always a stress and a demand on the body, followed by a response and an adaptation.
Exactly.
Can we talk a little bit about, thank you for that, that's very informative. Can we talk a little bit about the cold water therapy and that piece of it, how that ties in and how you do that?
Yep, and it's exactly the same technique. You are giving the body a dose of stress. When you go into cold water, it immediately changes your breath. You go into this panic, can't catch your breath, right? Like a cold shower.
Right. In fact, they say that's why you don't jump into cold water, really, really cold water, if you don't know what you're doing, because your first your first automatic impulse is to take in a deep breath,
Right.
and which means you can take in a lungful of water,
Cold
basically.
water, yeah. Yep. So it is a stressor. The body perceives cold water as stress, and it will automatically go into fight or flight mode, which means when the nervous system goes into fight or flight mode, it's stepping on the gas. The nervous system is going sympathetic. The body is producing adrenaline. This type of adrenaline is called norepinephrine or noradrenaline. That acts as a very powerful anti-inflammatory. Your respiratory rate goes up. You're breathing more because you're trying to catch your breath. Your heart rate is going up, so your body's under a deep load of stress. And the techniques that we learn from the Wim Hof method that I teach at my center is how to get out of that fight or flight, how to close your eyes, take your attention inward as if you were doing a meditation, how to slow the breathing down so that you're breathing slow in, slow out, how to lower the heart rate, which, by the way, breathing techniques control your heart rate. So if you want to control your heart rate, learn how to breathe. If you breathe quickly, heart rate goes up. If you breathe more calm and slow, heart rate goes down.
Now, Michael, I have to stop you there for one quick second, because I've read somewhere that the average person breathes somewhere between 12 and 16 times a minute. And by working with these breathing techniques, you can get your breaths to between 6 and 10 per minute.
Exactly.
And that your heart rate follows that. So it lowers your heart rate, which is what you just said.
Yep, and people with really good cardiovascular health breathe less. They don't need to breathe as much because their body's learning how to utilize that oxygen more efficiently. And if you have a high respiratory rate when you're just relaxing and your breathing rate's really high and then your heart rate's really high, it's kind of a sign of poor health. So by learning breathing exercises, you learn how to control your respiratory rates and also your heart rate. And so you have to breathe less. And I believe a turtle, I think, takes like 4 breaths per minute. And turtles live really long. And if you look at a dog, even when they're relaxed, they're kind of breathing very fast. Their belly's moving pretty quickly.
That's right.
And they don't live too.
They're panting.
They don't live too long.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that there's people that are panting all day long, and they don't really even understand it. But back to the cold water technique. So you immerse yourself in the water, and how many degrees the water, for instance?
Well, what I train with is 32. Wow. Yeah, freezing.
Freezing.
But really, you'll get the job done with 50 degrees and below.
Yes.
As long as it's creating the stress response. When you step in and your body's going, oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's, good news because you're getting the stress response.
Right. And is it normal to automatically start shivering?
No, shivering comes in a little bit later. Shimmering, basically our body has really 2 ways of warming itself up naturally. Shivering is one, which is just kinetic energy. It's just the muscles are twitching, moving, burning off glucose, and trying to raise core body temperature through that movement. The other way is something called brown fat. And brown fat is something that babies are born with. And scientifically, really what it is just it's fat with a lot of mitochondria. And so it looks brown. And what brown fat does is it turns on when the body's cold. And when it recognizes that it's cold, whether it's air temperature or, in this case, water. And what it does is when it turns on, it converts white fat. It's that visceral fat that's not very good for us. We don't want lots of it. And it converts it into heat. So that's why there's this fat loss benefit from doing cold therapy. So
there's a tangible fat loss benefit from the cold therapy as well.
Absolutely, yeah. You can lose visceral fat, significant amounts of body fat, and that's why a lot of these cryo places and cold therapy places will advertise, weight loss.
Is it significant though? Is it measurable, or is it just a little bit?
It's super measurable. Yeah,
Okay.
You can do the body scans and see your visceral fat declining. And there's different techniques on how to improve that mechanism. So one of the techniques that Andrew Huberman talks about is getting in to the cold, right? Doing a couple of minutes in the cold, then getting out warming your body up slightly and then getting back in. And then once your body goes back in, you start that shivering process. The brown fat's also turned on, and then you allow your body to warm up naturally. So instead of jumping in a warm shower or a hot tub or, covering yourself with towels and stuff like that, you just allow your body to warm up naturally.
Okay, so that's the better way to do it.
You're keeping the brown fat turned on.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as you're doing it in a safe, controlled environment. Obviously, if it's the middle of Minnesota in the wintertime and
and you still have a run through your car.
Yeah, and you're nowhere near like
Not a good idea.
a safe place to get warm, like, it's not a great idea. But like in a controlled environment, it is like one very good technique that you can use for reducing body fat.
So for our viewers, just very quick, if they want to get into this, obviously they have to be in good health. And the immersion in the cold water can be maybe 70 degrees the first time.
If you really want to start off lightly, 70 degrees, is just like chilly, so you won't have a huge stress response. There's not a ton of benefit in that water unless you stay in there for a really long time.
Okay. What's a very long time?
I don't know the exact, but there's like a scale of how long to stay in depending on temperature. So the higher the temperature, the longer you have to stay in, the lower the temperature, obviously, the less you have to stay in. What I train with is like 40 degree and below, about 42 and below, and we usually just go into cold water up to the neck so that the thyroid actually is getting into that
so
cold
you want
water.
it covering your neck so the thyroid gets exposed.
I get it right to my chin.
Okay.
And we do 2 minutes.
Okay, so 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
What do you do after the 2 minutes? Just get out?
Yep. So basically, you get into that cold water, you get the stress response, your body produces adrenaline, you go fight or flight, you close your eyes, you slow your breathing. Mentally, it's a letting go exercise. You got to really let go so you're not controlling the experience. So that's why there's a lot of mental, emotional benefit from the experience. You slow your heart rate down, you slow your respiratory rate down. When 2 minutes is up, you get out of the water, you do some warm-up exercises like light squats or horse stance. Okay,
even though the muscles are cold, you go...
nothing. You don't want to do like
it.
Jumping jacks or something. You just want to do like slow, methodical movements,
Just
horse
start
stance.
warming the body back up.
Yeah, because what happens is, when you do some squats, you have obviously big muscles in your legs. And when you go into anything cold, your body... what it does is it takes the blood and brings it to the core. So when you get out, you want to take all of that blood and bring it back to the extremities, which are your fingers and your toes. So a light, calming kind of exercise really helps to bring that blood back to the extremities. And then you're allowing your body to warm up naturally through, maybe you're shivering or also the brown fat adaptation that we talked about.
Okay. And Michael, I know that it's a 50,000-foot view of what you guys do at your Optimyze center. So let's talk a little bit about your centers and what you guys do there.
Yeah, we train people how to adapt and react to stress in a healthy way. We realize that that's something in our society that's a big problem. We live in trigger nation, right? Everybody's just triggered.
I like that. Trigger nation.
Yeah, everybody's triggered by everything today. There's like overuse of pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of unhealthy people. We have a lot of diabetes issues. We have a lot of heart issues. We have a lot of mental health issues. There's a lot of sleep issues, anxiety, depression. I mean, it's rampant. And the big one, autoimmune disease. It's everywhere.
Yes,
so,
it certainly is.
Oh, it's everywhere. I've never seen so much autoimmune disease in my life. There's so many people coming into our clinics that are dealing with Hashimoto's or Crohn's and a variety of different things. So what I see is that as humans, we are out of balance. And we're out of balance because we are disconnected with nature. And so it all goes back to my studies and training with the native people. The native people are badass. They know what they're doing, and they've been silenced. I don't care where you come from, South America, Central America, North America, Africa, Europe, Asia. One thing we all have in common is our ancestors were all really badass. And our suits are designed over thousands of years to adapt to our environment, to cold, to hot. We live in the most comfortable environment we've ever seen on this planet. We are disconnected from nature. We wear rubber shoes. We don't touch the earth anymore. We're scared of the sun because we think it's going to give us cancer. We are eating food in a box. We live in a box. We drive in a box. And we are looking at blue screens before we go to bed. We are so disconnected from the normal cycles of humanity, of waking up when the sun came up, going to bed shortly after the sun went down, eating organic food, walking, moving. So it's really not rocket science. And I understand that people get frustrated because they hear all these scientific terms and like, I'm not going to go through 10 years of studying to learn about my health. And you don't have to. I like to go deep and really understand the deep science. But in reality, it's not rocket science. All you really have to do is create some processes that our ancestors were doing in today's current technological world. And that might mean eating organic food that has to be prepared, right? So that's important. Getting in daily movement, regardless of its, everybody has a different movement that they want. Somebody wants to do a HIIT class. Somebody wants to sling weights around. Somebody might want to do a yoga class. Just move.
You got to move.
Got to move.
It's funny you say that because that's what I tell people, and especially as we get older, it's like, what do you do? And I go, just move. And in fact, I go one step further. I go, you got to move your blood around every day.
Yeah, every
Stagnant
day.
blood is not a good idea.
We didn't sit around.
That's how you get sick.
Yeah.
You got to move every day.
We didn't sit around. I mean, think about it. If you were hunting and gathering, you were up, you were moving, you had to get stuff done. Now we can order everything to our home.
It's nuts.
You can order everything.
It really struck me when you said that we live in a box, we drive in a box, we eat out of a box, and it's in so many ways it's about getting back to nature and learning about what you called the shell, this body that we live in. Yeah, and learning to work with it. Michael, I would encourage all of our listeners to check out his clinics, and I know they're in Phoenix now, but I believe that you're franchising them around the United States.
Right.
Yeah. So that's really exciting.
We want to spread the message of empowering others to take responsibility for their own mental, physical, emotional health through natural methods. We want to bring back that ancient wisdom with cutting edge new technologies. We have cold water therapy as a practice at our centers. We use saunas. Saunas are amazing stressors as well. We kind of talked a lot about how our body wants this sort of good stress. Saunas are a great way to stress the body in a healthy way. We teach breathing techniques. We have other technologies such as pulse electromagnetic field therapy, which is really good for pain and inflammation. It's non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical. Community is the part that's often not spoken about. We are community-driven culture and people, right? A race, right? A human race. We need to be around people like-minded. And we forget about that. And so we isolate ourselves, and to be around others who are lifting us up, who are up to good things. So we've created an amazing community, and we're making health fun. And that's important because I was sick and tired of just going to these clinics and the white coat telling me what I needed to do with my body. And in a dry, kind of boring atmosphere where they're in control of my health. And so I didn't like that relationship. So I wanted to change that relationship where if I can get people proactive about their health, if I can get them on the offense, if I can get them understanding and excited about learning about their own physiology, that biology is actually fun. Chemistry is actually fun when it's applicable, right? It was boring in 10th grade, but it's fun now. And I learned a lot about anatomy and physiology through you and bodybuilding in the 90s and learning about weight training. And so it's a lot of fun to learn about our body. And I think it's so precious that we keep our body strong and functional, because if we don't have that, then we really don't have anything. And so we're just trying to make health fun, build community, provide good relationships, and give back to our communities where we are locally. But we are spreading. We did franchise, and we're Optimyze, and we call ourselves a human optimization center.
I love that.
And we are growing. And so we look forward to more and more people adopting these ancient techniques. And I always like to bring it back to our native cultures and give respect to what they already knew and what we can learn today, even in our modern society.
That's amazing. Now, where can our viewers find out more about your Optimized centers, and where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, and it's just my name, Michael_Roviello.
And spell that R-O?
R-O-V as in Victor, I-E-L-L-O.
Okay, Michael Roviello, you guys.
And so that's the way to follow me on Instagram. And our facility is Optimyze, and it's at OPTIMYZE
YZE.
.me.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we obviously have a website, same thing, optimize.me is our website, and Instagram is where we're most active, pretty much just teaching people about the methods, showing people our community, and sharing education, because one of our pillars is education. We realize that we have to help to educate the society, and that it's our responsibility. You know, people say, "Oh, well, you're not a doctor." Well, that's okay. I don't need to be a doctor to learn about my own body. Like, I have permission, I have authority over my own body, and I don't need to go get a medical degree to learn how this body works. It's my gift. It's our own, gift in this life to have this amazing machine. And so I've been really learning how this machine works, and there's a lot more for me to learn, and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. But what I do know is that every time I go back in time and I started to learn how humans have survived on this planet through hot temperatures and cold temperatures and adversity, I realized just how powerful the human body and the human mind is.
It really is, and as you say, it really is a gift. Michael, great job today, and I just want to thank you for joining us. And now, as we wrap up our podcast together, I want to remind you that we told each other we were going to go grab a workout in the Labrada gym afterwards. Are you ready to work out?
Yes, because this is a dream come true. I've been following Lee since the 90s, growing up in Queens, New York, reading the magazines, Labrada Nutrition. I even had your old VHS tape, Mass with Class. I think that was the early 90s. And so to get connected with you and to be here to share with you so many years later has really just been a blessing. So thanks for having me.
You're most welcome, and we're really, really happy that we had this time together. Man, it's so informative. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. It's great stuff. Hey, guys, help us to grow the Lee Labrada Show by sharing this podcast with one of your friends, and be sure to hit the subscribe button. So, all right, you guys, stay motivated, get up, and look up. God bless you.
The Lee Labrada Show.
My life flashes right before me. Thunder from a distant shore.